I'm Christine Stavropoulos.
Και εγώ ο Νίκος Σαμίδης. Και αυτό είναι το Greek Podyssey, το podcast της Ομογένειας.
A podcast for Hellenes worldwide, sharing stories, culture, identity, laughs and a little bit of tsugrisma along the way.
Γιατί μπορεί να φύγαμε από την Ελλάδα, αλλά η Ελλάδα δεν έφυγε ποτέ από μας.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Greek Podyssey. Yes, Nico.
Hello, Christine. I see your summer vibes in your colors. So
It's
beautiful.
Santorini.
Oh, my God.
Let me tell you the story. I was in Santorini maybe 2 years ago, and I was wearing a white dress. And I thought to myself, I can't wear white up against white. So I was with a group of friends, and I disappeared. I said, give me 5. I disappeared. I found this dress, and then they saw me walking with, they're like, how did you do that? I said, I needed an orange dress to stand out against the white background for photos. Yeah, so I'm wearing my little piece of Santorini today.
I'm wearing my shorts getting ready for the Greek summer 2026.
Yes, and Australian summer
Yeah, of
2025.
course. It's too hot today.
Anyway, I've often told you one of my favourite topics close to my heart is the topic of the Parthenon Marbles, the reunification of the marbles. And we're very blessed today. I'm really excited because I've wanted to have this gorgeous lady on our podcast for such a while now, and we've finally secured her. We've got the beautiful, vivacious Elly Symons as our guest. Elly's background, she's Greek, her family background. She's got roots in Ithaki. I love Ithaki.
Blue zone.
And Cyprus. She is the Vice President of the Australian Parthenon Committee, advocating for the return of the Parthenon Marbles, the reunification. So we'll talk about that. She's also the co-founder of the Acropolis Research Group, which focuses on restoration, research and advocacy related to ancient Greece and cultural artefacts. Now, I follow Elly when she's doing her talks and walking through the streets, and she's always looking gorgeous and glamorous, and she does a great job.
It's a good timing now with the Acropolis because the scaffolding went down recently. So
I know.
There's more to say about that. I'm very excited.
Elly, welcome to the Greek Podyssey.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Welcome, Elly. It's a privilege to have you in our show and discuss this very important matter for all Greeks, Hellenes and Philhellenes.
There's a lot of people around the world, Philhellenes, that are very passionate and wanting and believing that the marbles do not belong in Britain. They belong in Athens. But before we get into that, your background is absolutely beautiful. You've got the black frame, you've got the beautiful arch and the greenery, and you're in Cyprus. So do you want to tell us a little bit about where you are at the moment? It looks amazing.
I'm in Larnaca in Cyprus, in a little boutique hotel where they've taken the front 2 rooms, which were, I guess it was a traditional house, because this arch that you can see behind me is just a very classic. Anyone that's been to Cyprus will recognise this shape of arch. So it's a very traditional Cypriot arch in the sandstone. And then behind there's a courtyard, and they've built a boutique hotel in Larnaca. But yes, it's a really lovely hotel, and I'm here for a couple of days.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about the Elly Symons story before we get into the Parthenon Marbles?
Okay, the short version. My grandparents were born in Ithaca, and they came to Australia pretty much 100 years ago. My grandfather went to Melbourne in 1924. Actually, and his father, he came to Melbourne in 1897 for 3 years and had a fruit barrow in Elizabeth Street in the CBD. And then he made some money, went back to Ithaca. My grandfather came in 1924, and in 1935 he brought my grandmother, and they got married in Melbourne in the first Greek church in Melbourne, Australia. Had family, 4 children. My mum was the second child. She grew up in Melbourne. She went to MLC, which was a girls' school, which I ended up going to as well. So my grandfather did very well, and I'm very proud of his history. He had restaurants in the city of Melbourne, several. And then on my father's side, my father was born in Cyprus, in Agros, in the mountains. And he was educated. He learned English, and he came to Melbourne in 1951. and he studied law for 2 or 3 years at Melbourne University. And he didn't end up finishing because it was very difficult in those days to study law in your second language, imagine that, and work at night as a waiter. And so it was pretty tough. So he didn't complete his studies, but he ended up having restaurants in the city as well. So I actually feel like my early childhood was very much, I'm a product of the CBD of Melbourne. And then we lived in the eastern suburbs. And so I grew up and with Greek and Cypriot heritage, but obviously born in Australia, like all of us, diaspora Cypriots and Greeks. And of course, as we're reaching this age of our lives, we all want to spend more time in Greece. And I know you do, and there are so many of our listeners that are doing that. So that's my sort of phase of life now where I'm spending time in the Patrida.
Wonderful. So how did you end up in Greece? Because I know you come back to Australia, but most of your time is spent in Athens. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that came about?
That came about, my marriage ended and my children had grown up, were in college. And so I thought, okay, I have spent the best part of my adult life living a very Anglo life in Melbourne, I have to say. And I always had a feeling inside me that I wanted to spend more time in Greece. And as a little girl, I always wondered what it was like living in Greece, living in Cyprus. Or what was I'd heard stories about my father's childhood. I'd heard about my grandparents' life in Ithaca, but not directly from them. And I just felt like I wanted to experience that, not just through stories, but I think to understand a city really and to understand your heritage, I think you have to live there. And so I wasn't really content with just being a tourist, having my 4 weeks a year in Greece. And after my divorce, that just opened a door to actually being able to fulfill that, enact that dream and make it happen. So I was travelling to Greece a little bit in that period, attending conferences, speaking about Parthenon. And so through those conferences, I started to connect, and then I decided to take the plunge and buy an apartment in Athens. So I was able to do that after my divorce settlement. So I live half the time in Melbourne and half the time in Greece. But now, in the last couple of years, I've always visited Cyprus, but now I spend a couple of months of the year here as well. So I'm living across 3 countries, 2 of my DNA and 1 of my birth. So it's a bit of a juggle, but I really love the opportunities and the insight that it brings.
Nick, are we jealous?
I was just ready to say that. I'm very jealous, not just jealous. Elly, do you always had that need for maintain your identity, your Greekness? Do you always be that kid like full Greek at home and pasticcio at the school for lunch? Is that your kind of childhood?
My mum was born in Australia. She wasn't, of course, she was Greek. My parents spoke Greek at home, but because my father had finished high school in English, and because my mum was born in Melbourne, their English was excellent. So my brothers and I didn't have to speak Greek at home. My parents' English was perfect. So we heard Greek. They spoke to us in Greek and in English, but we were a little bit, lazy or whatever. We were just, English was our first language. So we answered in English. So fast forward, my Greek wasn't that great, I have to say. It was pretty average. And then when my first 2 boys were very little, and I was at home with them. One of them had been quite unwell, so I didn't go re-enter the workforce. So I wanted to do something. So I went back to uni and did a graduate diploma in classics and archaeology. So in that, I studied ancient Greek for 2 years. And that was really an extraordinary insight into the language. And because it was taught with the really heavy focus on grammar, that really helped me understand. So that helped. And then fast forward another 15 years, I found myself living in Athens. And still I felt my Greek was pretty ordinary. but it has improved a lot. So of course I sound like the Australian, but to my local friends in Greece, but I've become more proficient.
Yes.
So, yeah. But food and things, we did have, sorry, just to answer Christine about the food. We did have Greek food at home, but I'm pretty sure I took cheese and Vegemite sandwiches to school. My mum didn't put the Greek stuff in the lunchbox. So I didn't have those issues.
It's so important. And I feel very blessed talking to you at the moment and see a beautiful lady trying to enrich her Greek identity, to get connected with her roots.
Absolutely.
In Cyprus and in Athens and in Greece as well.
Yeah.
That, for me, that's a blessing.
Was it your degree? Was attaining your degree the springboard into your interest in the marbles?
No, as a little girl, my father, who was a history lover and an avid reader, he was always telling us stories of ancient Greece, ancient Greek history and mythology, and stories of Cyprus, the history of Cyprus, the history of Greece. So I loved history. I took encyclopedias to bed long before we could have the internet and Google. We had the World Book encyclopedias or Encyclopedia Britannica. So I always took the encyclopedias to bed. I wanted facts. I wanted history. So I loved history as a little girl, and a little bit cliche, but I wanted to be an archaeologist. But I settled for a business degree instead because I thought I can't make a living as an archaeologist in Australia, not with the archaeology that I wanted to do. But I knew about the Parthenon Marbles. I knew about this awful Lord Elgin when I was a little girl, and I knew that the Parthenon marbles had been stolen and they were in the wrong place. They were in the British Museum. And I always felt that was a terrible injury and insult to Greece and to culture and Hellenes and Philhellenes. And I always knew about that from a little girl. And I always wanted to do something about it. It always made me very angry.
How much do you hate when they're referred to as the Elgin marbles?
I really hate that. Of course I do. And every Greek should hate that. As the saying goes, how can you name something after its thief, you know? So we have to correct people all the time and call them the Parthenon sculptures.
Nico grew up in Greece. I just want to ask you, Nico, when you were growing up, was that a subject that was discussed a lot during your youth?
Not really. After Melina Mercouri started the campaign for the marbles, because that was a mass campaign coming out of the Socialist Party, PASOK, that was the name.
Yes.
Pan-Hellenic Socialistic Party. And Melina was one of the main players in the party.
Love her.
And she started all these, the campaign, and start promoting outside, lobbying with other lobbies from America, from Canada, Australia. I think she did an amazing job starting up, bringing up this matter again up to everyone and pointing the fingers. And because she was a bit of a macho woman,
Yes.
Melina was an easy woman. She was like a fighter.
My icon.
Yeah, and I know you named your dog after Melina Mercouri.
Yeah, I did. My toy poodle's called Melina.
So that's how it went. Yeah.
She was. And of course, she delivered that famous speech at the Oxford Union, which we still see on YouTube. You can find it. And that's that very passionate plea of hers, which is a bit of a rallying cry that we all know that speech, but it was very famous.
How do you find Greeks in Greece? What's their attitude? Are they a bit apathetic towards the marbles? Are they still have that fiery passion to bring them home?
Look, I would have to say, in all honesty, I've lived there now for 7 years. I have different feelings from different people. Sometimes when I jump into taxis or just meet the everyday Greek in a cafe or something like that, firstly they think I'm a tourist because I must look like one. I don't know. I try to blend in. I don't wear tourist clothes and tourist handbags and sandals and caps. So I do try to blend in, but people often think I'm a tourist. So and then when they start chatting and they ask me what I do, and I tell them that's what I do. I'm an advocate, a campaigner for the Parthenon Marbles. And I get two responses. They either say, oh, like they wave their hand and they, oh, we've forgotten about them, or we're never getting them back or whatever. And they're a bit apathetic. Or they're sort of surprised that a non-Greek, I'm Greek, but they see me as an outsider that's living there, diaspora Greek. And they think it's remarkable that someone on the outside of their country is fighting so hard and is so passionate, and then they're thanking me profusely. Thank you so much. Oh, that's incredible. I wish we tried harder. I wish more people in Greece were more passionate. And they're very grateful. So I usually get sort of one of those two responses. Mixed.
Because you
yes.
know why? Because people, it's a long story. It goes years back, this story. So people, they gave up. They say, okay, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen.
Yes, and correct. And also the last 10 years, the last decade in Greece, people are struggling. They're worried about their monthly issues, their paychecks, their problems. And I completely understand that.
Yeah.
Obviously, even the ones that are a bit apathetic, of course, they want them back. There's not one Greek I've met that said, oh, no, they're better off there. I think maybe I met one and I thought he was a bit crazy. How could they be better? How could they be better there? They're chopped in half. And it's just not logical in anyone's language.
Let's take it back to where it all began. And I'll recap what I know, and then you can elaborate and fill in the gaps. The marbles were taken during the Ottoman occupation. Elgin maintained that he had permission from the Ottomans to remove the marbles and transport them. Then there's the story, mind you, the Turkey saying there's no such record of that document ever existing. We don't have it. And the story goes that Lord Elgin just ripped them off to put them in his backyard. He then was going through a divorce and he had to pay alimony. He needed to sell them to pay his wife, and he sold them to the British government. The British Museum is autonomous of the government, so there can't be a directive from the government to return the marbles. So hence we've had this back and forth, and that mysterious letter that the Brits maintain gave Elgin permission to remove the marbles. Is that pretty much it in a nutshell?
That's pretty much it. Yes, so it's a stalemate. So yes, this firman, the Ottoman firman that Elgin relies upon as his document of proof of permission, doesn't exist. However, in the Ottoman archive, there exists several letters around the same time as the firman in those couple of years leading up, 1801, I believe, 1802. There exists a letter, a firman, which actually, with the Ottoman's signature, so there are particular parts of a firman that researchers say have to exist, and one is the signature of the Sultan. So there's one particular firman that actually does exist, is actually Elgin's passport to enter Athens. He was the ambassador of England to the Sublime Porte, which is the Ottoman, the Sultan. So he was the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, and on his way to take up his post, he passed through Athens, and he had this stately home in Scotland called Broome Hall, and he had married a very wealthy woman, family, so it was new money. And he had a title but didn't have money, so that's what they did in those days. And he wanted the best house in Scotland, and he wanted these beauties, these treasures for his home. So back to the firman, we know in recent years the Turkish have actually been quite useful. Their researchers have said that there's been several researchers who have said that there is no such firman in the Ottoman archives. And so this other firman that actually does exist, the one that is Elgin's passport to enter Athens, is actually quite a significant document because it shows that the Ottomans have their archive is actually very rigorously kept. And so if this other firman that Elgin purports to exist, which gave him permission, if that isn't in the Ottoman archive, that is actually a very key piece of evidence not that many people have spoken about. So this purported firman that Elgin relies on, and this what British position is built on, this permission, but we had permission, they were obtained legally, the talking points, we just hear them over and over again and ad infinitum, they're like a broken record. So the thing about this document is that it wasn't produced in the language of the treating parties, being UK, being England, English, and Turkish or Greek. The only record we have of this document is an Italian translation. Italian was the language of Lucieri, Elgin's man, but the document doesn't exist in English, Greek, or Turkish. That's bizarre in and of itself. We've only got an Italian translation that's not certified. What kind of document is that to rely on as a worthless argument to prove ownership and permission? It's complete BS, sorry. And so even if you want to accept that document as evidence, it actually says, it makes 3 points. One is that he was entitled to make sketches of the sculptures. 2, that he was able to make plaster mouldings, take casts. And 3, he was entitled to pick up a few loose pieces on the ground. So even if you were to accept that document as evidence, as proved, those 3 things do not equate to erecting scaffolding. Think about this. He erected scaffolding for 2 years. His scaffolding was there for 2 whole years, and they were hacking slabs. The depth of the metapiece is like 1 metre deep. If you've ever seen some of the examples in the Acropolis Museum, they were too heavy. So he just sliced the entablature. He sliced the section up at the front and left the slabs there.
Wonder how there wasn't an uprising from the Greeks watching this.
So in that time, the Acropolis was a fort. It was the seat of the voivod. So there were other buildings on the Acropolis. It was the citadel, if you like. So the peasants, the common folk, the oppressed Greeks, they were down around in the residential areas down below. Look, I don't know why there wasn't an uprising, but these people were an oppressed people for several hundred years. They were used to being disempowered by their Ottoman overlords, and they didn't have a means. I don't think they had weapons or a means of uprising. It took to 1821 for them to have this uprising. Yes. So look, and that's how it happened. And so this stalemate, this reliance on this false document and then this unilateral. So they take them, they invest. So he gets divorced, he becomes bankrupt, and out of necessity had to sell them to the British government, not something he wanted to do. That was like 20 years later. It was a long time, 15 years later.
After all these years of campaigning and all this try to bring this matter up to everyone's ears, the British Museum still refuses to return the marbles. Why do you think this stalemate persists? It's about politics, pride, or perhaps fear of setting a precedent?
Yes. Look, it's all those things. And so I've been in the campaign for about 15 years. And in that time, I can see the arguments changing. And when the Greeks resolve one of their protestations, one of their arguments, they create another one. And then we address that one, and then they create another one. If you remember many years ago, it was there's nowhere to put them. So then, of course,
Athens Museum.
An inspired decision by the Greek government to create the wonderful Acropolis Museum. So that argument is dead in the water. Various other arguments. This clever little bit of legislation, the British Museum Act, which unilaterally says that that's this mechanism they hide behind to keep them in the UK. So, of course, the government says, look, it's a matter of the trustees of the museum. These were purchased by the UK government, invested in the trust of the British Museum, and then to seal that and protect that and build a wall in front of it, they passed the Museum Act. So that's another layer of protection. But,
that's the point I was going to ask. I was going to say,
yes,
British government, bills are enacted in Parliament. They can very easily remove that power from the British Museum by changing and putting in a bill saying that the custodianship of the British Museum is in the hands of the government. But it's like they're both playing games. Let's hide behind this.
Pretending they can't.
Exactly, but they can. Yeah. They absolutely can.
They can, of course they can.
What will it take for that to happen? So are we moving towards lobbying the government to change the Act to take the power away from the British Museum, put it in the hands of the government?
The British Museum Act is a national act for the UK. It's their act. So then you've got international law. But this is the tricky area. So customary international law is changing. But of course, who enforces international law? The enforcing of international law is the tricky bit. So the UK knows that. So it's like they just sit on their hands and say, we don't have to do anything. We've got this British Museum Act that we recognise, but no one outside recognises the British Museum Act. And as you rightly point out, and as I've always thought, of course, they could just change that act if it's just a bit of legislation. That's what they do in Parliament all the time. They legislate. So they could legislate a clause and say, except for the Parthenon Marbles. So, of course, they can do all of these things, but they don't. And Nico's point is, why don't they do it? Because they don't want to give them back. That's why they don't do it. So they make up all these reasons and they make circular arguments. And this is what they do. They're stonewalling and stalemating. And so what's it going to take? So the thing is, in the last few decades, the Greek government hasn't really, in my view, played a strong game and kind of has been very submissive.
Sorry for interrupting you. That's the question I want to make. Is the Greek government too gentle in all this approach? Is it time to take more assertive stance through legal or international pressure?
Absolutely, yes. And so just parenthesis, in parallel with all of this, we've got UNESCO. So UNESCO is the peak international body that deals with cultural heritage issues. And the number one, and it was formed in 1970, and many signatories to UNESCO all around the world, including Greece. And of course, it's the number one issue unresolved since 1970 is the agenda item. Every time UNESCO meets, the number one agenda item is the Parthenon sculptures. And you wonder, such an esteemed body like that has not been able to get the UK to the negotiating table to solve that problem. So this is where my point before about international law and international bodies have not been able to solve this problem, which means, Nico, that yes, it basically is a bilateral, by default, it should be an international issue. It should be one of international law and the right thing and the artistic thing and the moral thing. But that has not proven to be an avenue of any progress. And so in the end, it's defaulted to being a bilateral issue between the UK and Greece, which means it's an intergovernmental issue. And what does that mean? It means our government has to step up, really step up and fight at the highest of levels, at Prime Minister level. Mm-hmm. And really, in my book, for the first time, we've had a government in the last few years with Prime Minister Mitsotakis, who actually, on election, it was in his platform, it was one of his tenets of his platform. And in order to take it seriously, one of the other problems in Greece has been that this issue has been in the culture ministry. Now, it's not a criticism of any culture minister. We're blessed with excellent culture ministers, some better than others, but it's not a matter of the culture minister, because what can the culture minister do? Can the culture minister go to the UK and have a chat with the culture minister there, or the museum directors? See, this was the UK's strategy, was to downgrade this issue to one of culture and museums. Whereas one of my advocating stances has been for Greece to upgrade it, not to let the UK downgrade it, because that's a winning strategy, downgrading it. We needed to upgrade it to a matter for the Prime Minister in the Prime Minister's office. And so that's what happened with Mitsotakis. And so that's why we've seen in the last few years that he's actually prioritised it. He moved the issue from the Culture Ministry to the Department of Prime Minister. And he's got people in his cabinet who are focused solely on this issue, which is why, in parallel with a few other campaigners paving the way in the UK, a few very strong activists and philanthropists with some money who have lobbied UK politicians. So in parallel, this original meeting got set up with George Osborne and Prime Minister Mitsotakis. And that happened about almost 3 years ago now, slowly, and a lot of talks behind closed doors. And when George Osborne came out last year and said a deal can be done. And then Minister Mendoni, Culture Minister, reinforced this. And it's now we know that the issue is actually being spoken of at the highest levels and Prime Minister's also said he would not stand in the way of a deal. This is the closest we've ever been in 200 years. And it's because the Greek government at the highest level took the issue seriously, spoke at the highest levels in the UK, and that's where the agreement has to be made, at the highest level.
Let's have a short break to go to Helco Consulting and Lucas Theodoro.
The information shared in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or finance advice. Listeners are encouraged to seek professional guidance specific to their individual circumstances.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Greek Podyssey, where we discuss all things business in Greece and investment. So today we'll be talking about bank accounts. We've discovered thus far everything about the tax file number, setting it up, dual taxation, what implications can that have on me and my business income or personal income. And now the last important step of beginning any investment journey is setting up a bank account. So having a bank account, a local Greek bank account, is very important because that will mean that you'll be able to access all the government portals, pay and maintain anything like a property, pay your council rates, pay any bill through the e-banking services that are connected to the government portal. And it is also really important to be able to have a Greek bank account, as it does make transfers and domestic payments a lot easier. The Greek system now is slowly starting to introduce things like accepting Revolut and accepting transfers from non-Greek bank accounts, let's say for buying a property, but there can be delays if large sums are coming over, and they can get blocked and audited if it's not a local bank account. And obviously an international bank account or a Revolut account does not have access to the Greek government systems to be able to pay your rates and things like that. So for all intensive purposes, we always say it's easier to open up a Greek bank account, and that way you'll have much easier access to the system through GovGR, but also through companies that have services through online banking, like telephone providers, energy providers, anything utility-based, many companies. It is really important that this is done correctly as a tax resident abroad, because most banks will ask for your foreign tax file number, your latest tax return or notice of assessment if you're from Australia, and basically where did your income source come from, because they want to know where the originating source of your money comes from for anti-money laundering laws and corruption laws as well. So it is really important to come prepared. Most banks will accept English documents as they're internationally recognized. You won't need to translate them or apostille them, but obviously that can be dependent on the bank as well. And you can do this through a Greek bank that has a representative office in another country, like for example, the National Bank of Greece has a representative office in Australia, and so on and so forth. Or you can do it via proxy with your lawyer, but the banks have very specific power of attorney instruction that they'll provide for the lawyer to be able to open up the bank account for you here. Alternatively, you can initially start with your foreign bank account, and slowly, once the investor comes to Greece, you can also do it in person here, which is a lot easier with someone like us to guide you and have you there at the bank branch on the day.
Just on Nikos' previous point on setting a precedent, and obviously they don't want to feel like they've lost, you can skirt around that.
Correct.
Because it's not like someone went on an archaeological dig and found an antiquity and took it. This is something that's actually been taken off an existing structure. So you're not setting a precedent for every other country to say, you gave back the marbles, give us ours back. Greece wants our antiquities to be in museums around the world because that's how you introduce Hellenism to other cultures.
Yes.
There's a difference though, like we've got the Venus de Milo in the Louvre, and it's a different when you, like you said, for 2 years it was scaffolding and you're literally defacing.
I have to Sorry, I have to correct you.
Yes.
It's the Nike of Samos. And also, even that, why are we calling it Venus de Milo? Why aren't we calling it Aphrodite?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You don't,
Yes.
it's not setting a precedent because it's not like you found something, you dug it up and you can't now. It's a crime to dig treasures and take them back.
I need to mention that because it's a good timing. By the way, last night, the Museum of Louvre been robbed.
Really?
I know.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
they did an amazing robbery.
Napoleon's jewels.
Ocean's
Yes.
11 strikes again.
I've always been saying that to George Clooney they should make
Oh my God,
Ocean's
that's what I said.
14 the heist of the Parthenon Marbles. I've always been saying that.
That's a good idea.
I moderated a talk with George Varis and David Hill and actually said at the end of the day, it's going to be Ocean's, whatever number they're up to. They
Ocean's
do the
14.
heist, they come in and they take them back and say, come and get them. They're back in Greece.
That's a great idea. I want to say that the marbles, the issue, it's moral and legal. So it has two options. Do we fight more the legal aspect or the moral aspect of the story, Elly?
That's an interesting point, Nico. And I would add another crucial point, which I think is the point that trumps. It's artistic as well. An artistic position is that why would you cut in half one artwork, which I think is the winning argument that's irrefutable. We put up arguments and the other side comes with counter arguments, picks them apart. But the one argument which is irrefutable is the unified monument argument, which is basically that the whole building, including the entablature, the frieze, the metapiece, everything, the pedamental sculptures, the bits in the pediments, the whole building is one artwork, a unified monument. And so on that principle, one artwork has been cut into pieces. So that argument is irrefutable.
That's an excellent point, Elly.
It's an artistic argument. And so it bypasses the legal where they say, oh, we've got the vermin and blah, blah, or it's moral. And so they would say, more people see them in the British Museum and we see them for free.
It's like we kept in our museum the left arm of Mona Lisa.
I was going to use that as an example.
Of course. It's preposterous. It's preposterous that a piece of beautiful sculpture in its entirety, a piece of work in its entirety is cut in two. It's preposterous. No one can argue that is a good thing. So that is the winning argument, I believe. And it also, the other thing is and both governments, certainly the Greek government and the Greek Museum are talking about its world heritage. It's beyond just being Greek heritage. It's the emblem of UNESCO. If you look at the logo of UNESCO, it's in a circle. It's got these three columns and a pediment. The Parthenon is the emblem. So the Parthenon is emblematic of world culture. So it's not just a Greek argument or a Philhellene argument. It's a world culture argument. Here is one piece of glorious artwork, foundational piece of Western civilization, and it's cut into pieces in an article. It's not just, everyone knows this. Everyone can see that. And it's inarguable. And I think that's the key.
I love this argument, Elly. I love it. As an artist myself, I couldn't agree more.
Like you said, it's irrefutable. It's irrefutable.
It's irrefutable. That's the beauty of it. It's all very well to put up legal arguments, moral arguments, blah, blah, counter arguments, this way, that way. We go backwards and forwards. And in the end, that's a matter of opinion. So you have to come up with an argument that's irrefutable, that's watertight. Or in the end, you can even put all that aside. And as the wonderful Stephen Fry says,
I love him.
It's the right thing to do. Even if in the most simplest of terms, putting them back in the Acropolis Museum, because obviously they can't go back on the building, but giving them back, it's the right thing to do. Everybody knows that. And it's disingenuous to argue that it's not the right thing. It can just be as simple and beautiful as that, Stephen Fry says. It's the right thing to do.
So, Elly, from a legal perspective, Greece hasn't gone down the legal road. Is it for diplomatic reasons or the risk of losing the international legal fight, in your opinion?
Look, I think the legal option is quite a vexed pathway. There are some of us in the campaign that really wanted to look closely at this you don't go to court to sue someone. That's not what your intention is. The beginning of legal processes to get, say, an advisory opinion from a body like the International Court of Justice or the European Court of Human Rights, that was a perfectly legitimate pathway to end up in court. Court litigation, as we all know, doesn't always end up in court. Some vast majority of legal litigation doesn't end up in court.
Yeah.
It gets resolved before court. And so many campaigners were very against that, and the Greek government have been a bit gun shy and it wasn't a pathway they wanted to go down. Now, I felt like it was worthy of examination, that pathway, because like a general in an army, you've got your opponent on that side. Here you are on this side. You've got to look at every tool available in your arsenal to attack and to win the war, the battle and then the war. There's no point winning the battle and losing the war. So you have to play the long game. And in my view, having the legal route as a credible threat was really important. And I think there were many campaigners around the world that were really short-sighted. And I would even say that the Greek government was a bit short-sighted in this. Because for the last decade, since Jeffrey Robertson and Amal Clooney and Professor Norman Palmer came out with their legal advice, which they delivered, the Samaras government asked for the legal advice. And by the time it was formulated by Jeffrey Robertson and his team, it was handed to the Tsipras government, who put it in a filing cabinet and were busy, never to be seen again, which was really unfortunate because it took away what I thought was a credible threat. Why would the UK do anything if there was no credible threat? They've spent 200 years stonewalling, saying no, and there's no credible threat. We won't come out to play. We won't come and talk to the Greeks. So this was a credible threat. And in my view, it was a real shortcoming of our positions. Not our group were quite pro in examining the possibility of having a credible threat. Anyway, look, fast forward now, we haven't really, different things have moved now. The Prime Ministers have spoken. George Osborne has been, people have been working on him. He sees that it's time. And the zeitgeist has changed. The British Museum is closing for renovations. That whole wing is going to be closed for about 5 years.
Wow.
So the Parthenon Marbles are about to be crated up and put in storage.
Unbelievable.
So what better time, what better it's a soft way, it's a soft sell now. If they can do the deal, which I strongly believe the deal is basically done and they're fine-tuning some sticky parts.
As long as it's not a loan deal where we sign away our right
Correct.
to ownership.
Correct. This is the sticky bit, that the L word, the dreaded L word.
Yes.
No Greek wants to agree to a loan, which implies ownership. So we don't want that.
No.
So, look, previous solution was found for the Palermo fragment that came back from Sicily, and it was framed as a deposit. So the Sicilian Museum deposited that Palermo fragment into the Acropolis Museum. So no one talked about ownership and no one talked about loan. And so that was a good way of doing it. Now, that was one small piece. This is half the frieze.
Yeah.
Look, I trust and I believe in my heart that the deal is done, that they will figure out a solution to this because it's right, because it's the right thing to do, because they have to, because it's all things are pointing to this. And I think the UK common man on the street has got bigger fish to fry right now than the most common Englishmen on the street don't really know about the Parthenon and why they're there.
Coming up next, our legal segment with Natasha Karamahu.
Good evening from Athens. This is Natasha Karamichou, solicitor in Greece and legal advisor to Greek Podyssey. Today, we will elaborate on a topic that concerns many of you. How can we recognize our divorce court decision granted abroad in Greece? Why is it necessary to do it? What are the prerequisites and the documents to be submitted? A divorce is never a pleasant process. Most of the times, it's accompanied by enormous bureaucracy and paperwork, especially if the divorce was granted abroad, and more specifically, in countries outside the European Union context. But why is it important to recognize a divorce court decision if you're a Greek citizen along with any other nationality and you live abroad? Legal validity. The divorce decision granted abroad must be recognized in order to have legal effect in Greece. so as the consequences of the divorce are considered valid as well. Recognition is necessary for the person concerned to be considered legally divorced in Greece. This allows him or her to remain in the country. Lodging of divorce in the registrar. With recognition, the marriage registrar can be updated with the dissolution of the marriage, thus reflecting the correct marital status of the person. Marriage settlement. After recognition, the consequences of the divorce, such as alimony, custody, and property distribution, can be settled in accordance with Greek law. Settlement of inheritance issues. Formal recognition of the divorce is crucial for the proper settlement of inheritance issues so that the former spouse is no longer considered a legal heir. Personal status. If the divorce is not recognized, then the two spouses are still considered to be united in marriage in Greece, which can cause problems in various legal and administrative matters. In summary, the recognition of a foreign divorce decision aims at its legal force so that the dissolution of the marriage is accepted in Greece. This is necessary so that the personal and property situation of the former spouses can be settled under the Greek law. This is not an automatic process if the judgment comes from a non-EU country. The recognition of a foreign divorce judgment depends on the country of origin. Decisions from EU countries are automatically recognized unless there is an objection. For judgments from third countries, an appeal to the Greek court is required to obtain a declaration of recognition. What prerequisites does the law set for the recognition of the foreign judgment in Greece? As reflected in the Code of Civil Procedure, subject to the provisions of international conventions, a decision of a foreign civil court is valid and constitutes res judicata in Greece without any other procedure, provided that: first of all, it constitutes a final judgment under the law of the place where it was issued. Secondly, the parties were not deprived of the right of defense and in general of the right to participate in the proceedings. Thirdly, it is not contrary to a decision of a Greek court rendered in the same case and constitutes a final judgment for the parties. And fourth, it does not object to public morality or public policy. If you have a divorce decision issued abroad, you will need the following documents: the original or a copy of the irrevocable judgment of the foreign court legally certified with an apostille and an official translation. Certificate that the judgment is irrevocable if not indicated in the body of the judgment, legally certified with apostille and an official translation. The foreign court judgment will be served with a report to the public prosecutor. Certificates of no dissolution of marriage and no divorce decree issued by the competent local court in Greece. Certificate of no divorce action brought before the competent local court in Greece. The recognition of divorce in Greece is a lengthy court process. A lawyer should collect all necessary documents, officially translate them, order the issuance of court certificates, present the corresponding documentation during the court hearing, and collect the decision. The divorce is declared at the registrar of the Ministry of Interior by one of the two spouses, a lawyer with a special power of attorney, or a third person with a special power of attorney showing his or her identity card or passport. The registrar then will notify the municipality registries for the family status amendment. I will be more than happy to respond to your queries and discuss with you divorce matters that bother you. Join us at Greek Podyssey and find out more on family law topics.
My next point, it made an impact on me when I went to the Acropolis, which was maybe two years ago. Why wouldn't you have a big book there to have, like there's millions of visitors, a petition, and people sign petitions. Have someone there that gives a talk on the history of Lord Elgin taking the marbles, educate people. So then they think, oh, hold on, this is wrong. So then you've got people, millions of signatures signing petitions. Is it for political correctness, or why wouldn't you use that?
Can I say something,
Yes.
please? We've seen the public opinion favored more Greece the last years. Even in UK, people say,
Yes.
yeah, give them back. Why you hold them? It's a robbery. So
Each poll that comes out is
Yes.
a higher result.
I think it needs some marketing and
Yes.
PR from Greece at the Acropolis, at the site, and have these were taken, sign the petition. We need to lobby the government. So you've got that campaign happening simultaneously to people's voices are powerful.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. I live across the road from the Acropolis Museum, and I do know the director and the staff there. I think in Greece, and the museum people in Greece are really very, by nature, they're very proud of their work, their heritage. They're very proud of their museum. They're quite conservative in there. They're not. I think perhaps Australians, that's what I
We're a
always
bit
say,
more,
our
yes.
Australian-
Let's get
Our
'em.
Australian committee is the best committee in the world because we're quite combative. We're very forceful. They're actually, the Greeks, especially the museum community in Greece, I find they're very reserved. They're very academic, highly knowledgeable, highly credentialed. They do have displays like at the moment in the foyer of the museum, there's a beautiful display of the Firman and Lord Byron's 200 years in Greece. And there's also a display of the Firman and Lord Elgin. And so it's right just inside the foyer. And so it's there, but it's not in your face. And here's a table, come and sign the petition. They're a little more reserved in that. I agree with you. That's a great idea. I would happily stand at the front of the Acropolis
I'll be
Museum
there with you.
in the queue, with the queue there, that people lining up to go in every day and say, everybody over here, listen to this. Here's a petition, sign it. I'm sure we could. But look, in the end, the UK won't necessarily listen to that. The fight is in the UK.
If the UK citizens are vocal enough, because they're the voting, it's not going to make them elect a government based on giving back the marbles. But
No,
if it
it's not.
becomes look globally what's happening at the moment with boycotts and what have you,
Yes.
people's voices are actually working.
Look, movements for change are a difficult thing. We've seen in the last 5 or 6 years all these, where I think we're a bit protest tired. There's just so many protests and everyone's bombarded. And I think the average Englishman in the street, they've got a lot of problems. They've got
Other
a lot
problems.
of national problems.
Exactly.
And that's the problem. It gets caught up in
Can I-
things in everyday life.
if we remove the marbles from the British Museum, what that means in revenue losses for the British Museum, because the British Museum doesn't give a shit what people says. It's an organization. They making
Right.
profits. That's what they do. Losses
point.
and profit. That's what they do. They
Well,
don't care what
it's-
people says. So what would be the losses for them if we remove the marbles?
The first thing they would say, which is true, is that the British Museum doesn't charge an admission fee. So there's no entrance fee. So one of the things they say is people from all over the world come and see them for free here, and more people come and see them here than they would in Greece. Of course, Geoffrey Robertson had the best answer of all to that. He said, if it's a matter of more people seeing them in the world, he said, put them halfway between Beijing and Delhi, and then more people in the world would see them. Good.
Love it. I love it.
What a brilliant argument. It's fabulous argument. This is the funny, there were some very funny arguments and counter arguments. So that was a great one. But to your point, so they would argue that the British Museum does not charge admission. So that's not a winning argument for us. But look, the thing about it is one of the parts of the solution is also replicas. I was actually fortunate enough to be in the British Museum a few months ago, and I was looking at them and looking at them and looking at them. And I think the average layperson would not realise at all if they were looking at a very good copy of the marbles. And of course, with our technology, and we have one of our colleagues, Roger Michael at the Institute of Digital Archaeology in Oxford, he has produced a copy out of Pentelic marble of the Horse of Selene, and it's very beautiful. If you go online and Google it, you'll see 3D copy of the Horse of Selene, and it's magnificent. Now, you cannot tell the difference. A layperson could not tell the difference. So for goodness sake, really, the originals should all be together, unified in the Acropolis Museum, and the British Museum could have a perfectly lovely set of copies that would fulfill their needs, fulfill the needs of the patrons and the customers of the British Museum. And then we have so many visitors to Greece. And so we could be seen in the purpose-built Acropolis Museum, unified all together, instead of this display of you get one Pentelic frieze original and then a white plaster copy next to it. And then it's a travesty. It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
Well, look, people think I travel all around Europe, or I should, and I haven't. I was my first 2 years in Greece were during COVID. I got stuck there. Were nicer places to get stuck than in Melbourne, which was highly locked down, horrific. So I would take there were still issues in Greece, but I would just take my coffee and I walked around Plaka all day, every day, without a soul in sight. Like I literally had Plaka. You know how you go to Plaka now and there's people everywhere and there's cars, there's people, there's souvenirs, tourists, there's hustle and bustle. I walked around Plaka for 2 years almost by myself. It was, now I think back very fondly and romantically at that period. It was really lovely. So that was a really big bonus. My daily life is that I'm an investor, so I have to know what the financial markets are doing. So if I'm in Greece or I'm in the wrong time zone, so quite often I'm up half the night looking at the markets. And then, so I sleep in when I eventually get up. I have a coffee on my balcony, and then which is near the Acropolis Museum, which is very lucky. And then I set off somewhere between 11 and 12 on my Elly's adventures in Athens. So that's where I will pull out my car. I'll just walk. I walk central Athens. I've walked every single street. I've been to every museum. I've seen all sorts of things. And so when I find something that I think my Greek diaspora followers and friends will like, something that may not be through the lens of a native Greek that has grown up there. So I've got a lot of, yes. Sure. Look, I'm on X, so Elly M Symons. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, also Elly M Symons. And I often post on Greek City Times. They often post some of my videos. And on LinkedIn. I've actually got a very big following on LinkedIn. So my style on LinkedIn is a little more professional.
Yeah.
And my sort of Instagram, Facebook stuff. So I'll just post on something anecdotal, something that I see that I think, I think my Greek Australian, Greek American followers will like that, because and people always say to me, they see my Greece through our diaspora lens. It's not that might think something's really interesting that a local Greek would think, what are you taking a video of that for? You know?
Can I have the last question? I think it's a beautiful question. I want to do it.
Okay.
So you've given so much of your time and your life for this beautiful cause. What would it mean to you personally, standing in the Acropolis Museum one day, seeing the Parthenon Hall again, complete as it was meant to be? I want to cry now. I feel very emotional.
Nico, you've hit the nail on the head. Of course, there would be tears in my eyes, really, a moment that would be so magical for people that have worked on it, that have believed it and worked on it, obviously, but for all Greek people, all Hellenes, all Philhellenes, and we've said that it's extremely important, and we touched on before, it's world culture. It's emblematic cultural artifact of Western civilization. Apart from of course, there are magnificent artworks, magnificent buildings, and the only thing comparable, I would say, is the Great Pyramid of Giza, and that's you can't even compare. They're in different categories. One's an engineering masterpiece, so is Parthenon, but it's an artistic masterpiece. What does it mean for Greeks? It means everything, as Melina said. It means the world for Greek people and for all people to see these incredible sculptures reunited. Geoffrey Robertson said that it was the show reel of ancient Athens. In the Parthenon frieze, you see the Panathenaic procession. You see every single part of Greek society represented in that Parthenon frieze. Old men, old women, water bearers, children, musicians, people pulling along oxen, people, cavalry riders, hoplites. You see every person in ancient Athens and mythology is represented. So it's our whole entire history sculpted in Pentelic marble. And there it is. It's unbelievable. It's extraordinary. And it's ours. And it makes us so proud. And we want to see it reunified where it should be.
I want to say a big thank you for all your years spending on this cause
Representing
as
us.
Hellene,
Thank you.
a Greek.
Thank you.
I prefer to say Hellene because we talk about
Helene,
marbles.
είμαστε Έλληνες.
Είμαστε Έλληνες. Exactly
Αφού
right.
είμαστε Έλληνες.
Exactly right.
Ναι, ναι.
Thank you, Elly
Thank you.
Symons. It's been an absolute pleasure. We were really looking forward to this podcast because it is a subject that's very near and dear to our hearts. And thank you for representing the diaspora and doing such a great job. We're behind you, and this podcast is always available to you at any time because we just love chatting to you.
Next year, Christine and myself will be in Greece, so we can do this petition book. We can have a stall there. I'll do the souvlaki next to it. And
Well, we can even do a podcast when we're in Greece next time when we're there next year.
Let's arrange it. Let's see if we can do one from the Acropolis Museum.
oh, that would be lovely.
That's it.
That's
Done.
you.
Wouldn't that
That's
be?
you. Elly,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both for having me, and thank you for this podcast. We've got so many beautiful presenters and podcasts now showcasing Greek culture around the world. So bravo to both of you. And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Very much. Do you feel
Inspired by Elly's passion, her knowledge, and just this sense of security, knowing that there is someone there on the ground, speaking to the right people, advocating the right things, and being so knowledgeable, and knowing that we have a conduit from here to Greece, and it's Elly Symons, and she's wonderful in every aspect. She's gorgeous.
I feel very emotional to know that people, Greek Australians, Greek Americans, Greek whatever, they're still fighting for this cause. For me, it's the world. And I really got emotional thinking Elly in front of the Acropolis, and the Acropolis to be full as one, back as it was.
Yeah, just visualizing that and knowing that Melina Mercouri from up above would be smiling down and her vision realized. It will be. I feel very confident. We've got the right people. We're moving ahead, narrowing, and I think it will be realized in our lifetime.
You can listen to this podcast in all our podcasts.
Yes, Spotify, if you want to just listen.
Platforms, and you can watch this podcast as well.
Yes.
And we'll look forward to see you into the next episodes.
Thank you for joining us. We've really enjoyed this because it's a subject that the diaspora around the world is very passionate about, and we're happy to report it with you with Elly Symons. Please follow her on all her platforms, Elly M Symons, and she'll keep you up to date as well, and you get to see her gorgeous face more often. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
see
you,
you in the
Nico.
next one.
I'm Christine Stavropoulos.
Κι εγώ ο Νίκος Σαμίδης. Και αυτό είναι το Greek Podyssey, το podcast της Ομογένειας.
A podcast for Hellenes worldwide, sharing stories, culture, identity, laughs, and a little bit of tsugrisma along the way.
Γιατί μπορεί να φύγαμε από την Ελλάδα, αλλά η Ελλάδα δεν έφυγε ποτέ από μας.